Hello and welcome to the Solutions Scoop. I'm Ravi Venkatraman.
And I'm Amanda Tepper. Ravi and I are co-founders of the Chestnut Solutions Institute, an independent forum dedicated to advancing the future of the investment solutions industry. Here at The Scoop, we examine the latest solutions marketplace developments and speak directly with solutions industry leaders. Our guests span the investment ecosystem, from OCIOs to asset owners, investment consultants, asset managers, and other key industry stakeholders.
These conversations are an important part of the Institute's mission to improve transparency and help establish standards and best practices across the solutions industry by educating asset owners, providers, and all other industry stakeholders. Let's get to today's scoop.
I'm delighted today to be joined by Bernie Reidy, Managing Director and National Endowment Foundations Executive at Bank of America's Private Bank. Let me give you a little background on Bernie before we get into the conversation. Bernie brings over 30 years of experience in the nonprofit sector and plays a pivotal role shaping and executing the firm's national strategy, serving endowments and foundations across the U.S. He leads a distinguished team of endowment and foundation specialists who work closely with financial advisors and portfolio managers to develop custom investment strategies and OCIO mandates tailored to those institutions' specific missions and long-term objectives. As you're going to hear in a minute, it's all about customization in the solutions and OCIO space. Before joining Bank of America in 2015, Bernie held senior leadership roles at Common Fund in the client and E&F areas and has extensive experience spanning key positions at Boyd Watterson, Mercantile Bancshares, MTB, and Allied Irish Bank, all working with institutional and nonprofit clients. A recognized leader well beyond his professional accomplishments, Bernie has received the prestigious Irish American Wall Street 50 Award not once but 3 times, and he serves as a trustee of the New York St. Patrick's Day Foundation. Welcome to the Solutions Scoop, Bernie.
Thank you, Amanda. Pleasure to be here.
So, Bernie, your title is National Endowments and Foundations Executive, but you and your team, I think of you as having built an enormous OCIO business with that client base. We have it at just shy of $100 billion on our OCIO list at the Chestnut Solutions Institute, and that's effectively 100% of Bank of America's OCIO business. So to get our listeners oriented, can you please explain what you and your group do and how your E&F business fits in with the broader Bank of America and Merrill Lynch advisor business?
Great. Amanda, thank you again. Pleasure to be here and spend some time with you today. Our practice, think of us as a specialty practice within Bank of America. We sit within our global wealth and investment management franchise, and we are the institutional investment and philanthropic solutions division. We approximately have about 190 individuals across 33 locations nationally. We're across all the markets. And we really plug right into both Merrill Lynch and the private bank. Whenever there's an opportunity working with an endowment foundation, nonprofit, both institutional or private, we're the group that comes in to bring our solution set and our services. So it stems across all investments, whether it be a bespoke, custom, single mandate, or someone's looking for more of a fiduciary advisory construct, or they're looking for a full-fledged, dedicated OCIO discretionary arrangement. Our business is coming in and working alongside of our partners. So regardless, I always tell people, regardless of which door you're going to come through or which brand you're attracted to, whether it be Merrill Lynch or the private bank, we work directly with our Merrill institutional consultants or the institutional client advisors within the private bank as the product solution specialist group and strategists that come in. So we're doing everything on the investment front. We're educating. There's a lot of additional services value add that we bring in. As you mentioned, just under 100 billion. We're right around about 81 billion in total assets from a discretionary standpoint. When you add up all of our philanthropic assets and client assets, including private philanthropic assets, we're right around almost 150 billion. So it's a substantial. When I joined about 10 years ago, we started around 30 billion. And over that time period, we've grown to almost 80 billion. and really have become the largest outsourced CIO for endowment and foundations. So we're very proud to have that distinctive honor of being considered as being number one. I hope we can maintain that over time, just given there's a lot of consolidation in the industry. But that gives you a highlight, a little bit of what we're doing, and I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more through our conversation.
Yes, absolutely, we will. And just the fact that you threw out 80 and 150 billion, both under one umbrella, points to why I'm going to ask you this next question, which is a bit existential. What is an OCIO? What is a fiduciary? Let's start with what's an OCIO mandate, right? The Chestnut Solutions Institute has been doing a lot of work on trying to define this because it's going to help the industry and investors, I think, ultimately. So we define an OCIO mandate as any engagement where a third party provides both strategic and investment management services for a pool of assets. You, Bernie, are joining our new working group to help us define OCIO mandates more clearly. We're going to be digging down into that. But let me just ask you at this point, and we haven't even kicked it off yet, what do you think about this definition? And where is there confusion in the marketplace?
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's a broad definition, and I think we start broad and then you further define down. But I do think that, some of the common issues that I run into in the industry at times is you'll find, look, we also know there's a lot of providers in the space. I mean, you probably have your own number that you're tracking as far as how many providers in the OCIO industry. It's growing every day, right? So we have more new entrants coming in. I think one of the challenges that many feel that if I just offer discretionary investment solutions for my client, I can be considered as an OCIO. And while discretion is really a component of an OCIO offering, it's not the whole story. True OCIO, I think, replicates what would be a real full investment office approach, providing fiduciary accountability, thinking about the strategic governance of that whole entire portfolio, what it means for the organization. You're thinking about institutional quality portfolio construction, the research, the diligence, scenario-based stress testing, spend model and testing around that, and also having the ability to look at deep look through to core concentrations in the portfolio. Knowing what you own and how you own it is critical. It's a solution, in my opinion, the OCI is a solution built for complexity. And, when you really think about complexity, risk, long-term alignment with the mission of an organization, it's not just strategic asset allocation or manager selection, right? It's also the ability of coming in and taking a fiduciary institutional approach to implementation of a thoughtful, even tactical decisions and rebalancing. And if you're going to be handing discretion over to somebody, those are really important features to be looking for in their capabilities and their track record to be able to deliver on tactical, as they're going to be giving, the full responsibility of managing the ships in the portfolio over long term. So I think that's where some of the confusion comes into play. And I also think too, it's just, there's different levels of fiduciary that's out there, and not every OCIO provider may hold themselves to the same fiduciary standard. And I think for most organizations, they think fiduciary is fiduciary and can move on, but fiduciary is important. There's different standards. Now we operate on a platform and a model that's built off of a trust fiduciary framework, where we function really as a discretion investment fiduciary, subject to the highest standards under the state laws. But some OCIOs may just embrace fiduciary standards where they're just obligated to disclose conflicts, or maybe they're beholden to suitability standards and may have conflicts of interest, but that are more common. So the type of fiduciary standard really matters, especially when you're looking to hire a provider who will assume full discretion over your portfolio. So those are some of the things I see with when we try to define OCIO. We think about fiduciary, what it really means. And I think, as well, we'll get into probably the definition too of the types of OCIO providers out there, from large financial service firms to more of the boutique to more of the traditional consultant model. And there's more than just the three, right? We're going to further flesh that out. So I do think it's helpful for understanding who does it, how they do it, and, where are the standards in the industry and who's following which standards.
Yep, all of the above. And just that answer explains why there's confusion. We were talking about OCIO. What is an OCIO? What is not? what is a fiduciary, which there's a range of fiduciary, and you mentioned discretion a number of times. So let's turn to that piece for a minute. The Institute's
Sure.
current OCIO mandate definition deliberately does not delineate between a discretionary mandate and a non-discretionary mandate. There's a reason for this. Regardless of the language in any OCIO engagement, in practice, we know that clients engage with their OCIO providers across a wide spectrum of discretion, and this can evolve over time. And look, at the end of the day, if the client asks their OCIO provider to do something, regardless of what it says in the agreement, the manager is going to take care of the client's needs. So what's your view on discretion in an OCIO mandate? Because it seems to me all the different types of engagements you mentioned earlier that Bank of America has with your nonprofit clients would meet our definition of an OCIO engagement.
Mm-hmm. I think when you go back to the early stages in the OCIO evolution, and my predecessor firm, when I was at Common Fund, we were one of the early pioneers in the space at the time. And for many, they were using clunky building blocks or fund structures to be able to meet the needs of multiple clients. And discretion was sort of given that you were heading over to discretion. And I think as organizations were looking at this, especially large organizations, that was a turnoff. That was a non-starter. They wanted to have more control, more input, more collaboration into the process. And I think very quickly and early on, you saw that most of the providers in the space realized we have to be flexible. It's got to become a flexible model. And I'd say even it is for us for today. I mean, we've built that flexibility in intentionally because when you go up in scale, in size, many organizations may have staff. They don't have a full-fledged investment office, but then maybe there's a couple people. What they don't have with the power of Bank of America, what we build and what we bring, we can backfill it, right? We can work in a construct that's more collaborative. I don't think OCIO is let's bring in 3 small cap managers for you to interview and choose. That's more traditional consulting, right? But for someone that wants to understand, give me your research, give me access to your research team. Let's dig into the details of how you're coming up with your recommendations. Let's develop a way and approach as to how this will work for us and have some say in it. And I think that discretion piece, I think most investors, I think may know that today, but not all of them do. I think most of them think like I have to flip the keys across the table and I let someone take out my car. And I'm not sure if I'm comfortable doing it. I always tell people in the beginning too, Amanda, is, discretion will come over time. And a lot of times you'll start off, especially if they come from a traditional consulting model, they want to sit up front with a hand, one hand on the wheel, one foot on the brake, and making sure you're not going to, take the car in a direction they don't want to go. And at some point, they'll get comfortable in sitting in the back seat and giving you direction. And maybe at some point in the future, they'll let you take it down the road, knowing that you've set up ranges and guardrails that are going to keep you from just taking it where you want to go. So I think that discretionary piece is probably what's driving why they want it. I think it's more fiduciary oversight, more control, the ability for someone that's going to bring information real time. And that's the other thing I think in the OCIO industry. A lot will come in a quarterly meeting and deliver all the information they did in the past quarter. Well, for some organizations, they want to see real time, especially in the world we're living in right now. I mean, coming the first half of the year here, we're on with our clients every single day. They're getting to feel what it's like to work with an investment office because we are an investment office, and that's what we're delivering to them. So that collaboration and that engagement, the real time engagement, being able to kind of look and stress test and talk in real time. Now it really comes down to what the client wants. Some will say, "That's great. We trust you. We don't need you to give that to us every day." Others want that, and so I think that flexibility is really, really critical, in the industry.
Yeah, that all gets back to the customization we were talking about at the beginning. There's customized levels of discretion that are going to evolve over time. And you're not flipping a switch, you're not handing over the keys, because ultimately the true fiduciary responsibility always lies with the asset owner, no matter who they've hired, no matter what the agreement says and how much discretion they might have given away, right?
You can't just drop the keys and walk away, right? It's just, they have to have ownership, but you want a fiduciary partner. I always, want to get asked a lot of times from clients, Give us what's the best approach? What's the best approach that you've seen work the best to give us the best outcome? And we always say the best outcome, the best approach is ones where we have an active client engaged with us, sitting alongside of us, collaborating with us. That always gives us the best outcomes when we have that engagement. If it's just come report to us every quarter, they take a really full backseat approach. I think that we tend to find that there's you're not all in alignment. Alignment is critical. And then when you get into that holistic value measurement you talk about, how are we delivering? What are we supposed to be focused on? How do you weight each of those components to evaluating your relationship? Again, if you're hands up and so far away, that's hard to get a true understanding as to how that relationship should be working with you.
That's exactly right. And thank you, Bernie, for that segue, because that's what I wanted to talk about next. You and your team at Bank of America have really been great partners here with the Chestnut Solutions Institute. And as you know, one of the topics that we were spending most of our time discussing at our member forum in Boston a couple of weeks ago is the Institute's new OCIO evaluation framework. And it is called holistic value measurement exactly for that reason. Your colleague, Bill Jarvis, by the way, shared a lot of useful insights and feedback in his role on that working group that helped us create the framework. And, want to publicly shout out, thank you, Bill, and you can pass that on to him. And why do we say holistic? Because we know from all the investors we've spoken to and done research over the years, and you know this, Bernie, you're on the front lines, investment returns and cutting fees are not the key drivers of the explosive growth we're seeing in the OCIO business. It's this holistic, all these different services that professional providers can bring that institutions of all types really value over time. So our holistic value measurement framework is designed to enable investors to assess all of the provider capabilities required to give investors the complex and customized OCIO engagement that they're looking for today. And there's three types. So let's start with, we have it in three buckets. We call it services, value-added services, operations, middle and back office of an investment office, and then the investment piece. But let's start with the services piece, because I know you and your Bank of America team provide a really wide range of very specialized value-add services for your nonprofit OCIO clients. So I think you call it consulting. Can you walk us through some of them and how you've built that and how that works?
Sure. So when I joined 10 years ago, we took a very sort of step back and evaluated where was the industry going. And, our goal and our objective was to differentiate ourselves in the market. And I think also meet the needs that we were seeing coming from the market. And in doing this exercise, we quickly looked at the fact that we're dealing with a lot of organizations that need help. And they need help on the investment piece and need greater oversight and control. And they need a better framework for decision making and implementation for themselves. That was given. You go through a financial crisis, everyone didn't think they had Lehman Brothers until they realized, well, a lot of my counterparty risk was with Lehman Brothers, with managers that never do that, right? So they were, that was like the core crux of it all. But what we also saw were a lot of organizations that were coming to us to say, hey, look, we need help because we need better returns. We need to improve our performance. And when you get in the conversation, say, why? If we start with the question as to why is it that you're so reliant on having to squeeze so much out of your endowment to support operations? What's causing the need for you to have the return objective you have? Or why is that influencing your liquidity and risk tolerances? And I think when you peel the onion layer back, you start to realize there's fundamental gaps, there's operational constraints, there's things that they may or may not be taking advantage of, and there's opportunities. So we thought, going back, like say 10 years ago, the industry's not just needing an OCIO model. They need an OCIO 2.0 model. And what I look at and I define OCIO 2.0 model to be is you need to be working with, in our opinion, working with providers that can help come in and help solve the bigger issue. So if you think about the umbrella over an organization of the enterprise of a nonprofit, let's say, you've got issues that stem from the top, thinking about your leadership. You have your leadership trained, educated, Have you created the right culture of giving with that leadership team? Have you developed the right strategic plan? What about succession planning? Have you thought through that? When it gets into operations, operational efficiencies, structures, thinking through your financial decisions and the cost structures and the benefits of using different financial instruments, thinking about revenues, contributions, fundraising, development. Are you taking advantage of all? Do you have the right gift acceptance policies? Do you have the right donor enrichment strategy? Do you have the right marketing and communication strategy with your constituents? When you start to look at all those issues, they all feed into the bottom line. They all have impact to the bottom line. Reducing costs, making yourself more efficient, improving revenues and contributions. Well, now if you can fix some of those areas, now you're really are impacting bottom line in a positive way, making yourself more resilient, making yourself more sustainable, making yourself expand your mission. So that when it comes to the investment piece, you can take a much more intentional design. Your risk tolerances change. Your liquidity tolerances would change or needs change. And you could take a different approach to how you invest. So we've built into our model a full-fledged, consulting practice, nonprofit business management consulting practice that's focused in around fiduciary review and support, thinking through leadership development, all the things I mentioned that I saw as areas that can be improved. We've got teams with deep expertise. We've got professionals that have been, with law degrees, PhDs. They've been in the fundraising role. They've been involved with policymakers. We've got the depth. So it's not just a couple people. We've got over 15 people that are strategists that come in, and we stay with the client throughout the relationship. So what we typically do in the beginning is we do an assessment, prioritizing where their gaps and opportunities are. And at the end of the day, as much as we do this work, and we do it for free, we don't charge for it. It's part of our services. And it's integrated into the investment component for this to work as a true OCIO 2.0 model. And it stays with the life of that relationship. So the reality is when we do it, when we get it right, and I always say, it's not always do it all at once because you still need collaboration and working with the client. Client has to have priorities. They have to have the bandwidth, and they have to be able to, kind of chunk out the work. So we prioritize it. We look at where the low-hanging fruit is, and we come in and help solve and work with them. And I think when we built that, that's been one of the reasons why we've grown. We've grown very responsible over the years. We're not acquiring going out and acquiring other firms and growing by acquisition. We've been growing organically. And that organic growth really has come because we feel this model is the better model. And I personally think that as we look going forward, that'll be standards you're going to start seeing in industry because that's kind of where the gaps are. And if you solve that component, it makes the investment piece more in alignment to their mission and to the needs of the organization.
Yeah. So it's you're really partnering with your clients long term in many ways. And
yeah, exactly.
It's all customized because you're getting to know what they're doing. Yeah.
Right. And that's why we stay with the life. We always assign someone that's understanding. You go out and hire a project-based consultant to come in, which many organizations would. They don't really understand the rest of the pieces. They're not, you're oftentimes giving them a specific, single mandate to solve for you. Did your plan work? Whatever it might be. But when we're staying engaged with the client on it and can provide those services, we stay with the life of that relationship. So as they evolve, we understand them. We've already become integrated within their framework. We're sitting on their side of the table now. That's the true holistic aspect of being a provider in that space. And, we're starting to see more providers starting to offer some of these additional services in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. More of them are becoming table stakes. And if we talk about table stakes with OCIOs, another really important piece is the operating capabilities, the operating piece of an institutional investment office. Things like handling legacy assets, custody, customized reporting, cash flow management. How have you, in your business, figured out how to deliver these to your nonprofit clients? I think it's been a mix of buy and build. And also, which ones are most used across your client base? Most used, most valued?
I think, given we're Bank of America, a very large financial service firm, we've got, I think, award-winning state-of-the-art, cash management solution systems, banking, which ties and integrates very well in digitally with a lot of other products and services, including what we do in the OCIO space. So that the seamless approach to how you can work with one institution that solves a greater need. But again, specifically into the investment component piece, I think some of the common ones we typically are running into, legacy assets, right? I think most people don't realize when you're in the OCIO industry, maybe you've got it and you started with maybe a consultant 20 years ago, and maybe it evolved into an OCIO now with that same consultant. And now you're thinking of making a change. Well, 20 years of commitments to private equity and other liquid investments that you're not going to just, exit when you leave a relationship to previous provider have to be managed, right? And most organizations are building internally. They're relying on someone else to help do the consolidating of performance reporting, consolidating of asset levels. So, that typically becomes, one we see quite often when we've got legacy assets to have to incorporate in from that consolidated reporting. So to your point, when you mentioned buy versus build, we look at it as going, what are we really good at? What do we want to spend our resources and budget on? We've got out of the asset management business. We're not doing fund management. We pour all of our dollars on the investment side into, research and building the best platform we can. But, when it comes to some of that, we're partnering with what we consider to be best in class providers in the space that are technology experts that really have invested in this, and they continue to enhance the services. And we'll bring some of those components in to meet the needs. It's usually pretty seamless to the client. Same thing, I think, when it comes to doing sort of sub-fund accounting. Sub-fund accounting, I think, is another one where if you're working with an endowment at a university and they have a lot of sub-endowments or a lot of multiple pools, or in a community foundation where you're going to need to have sub-fund accounting, broken out between, realized and unrealized gains, losses, for each of their individual constituent base, very important. And I think in those cases too, we're partnering a lot of times with folks that this is their core specialty. This is what they're known for. And I think, some of the other services that we provide are really more onto the framework of what we do from customized reporting. A lot of times clients want a specific custom report. They want to look at peer benchmarking. They want to look at, like what if scenario testing analysis. So, what we do is everything is very custom. And I think the customization comes in either we're able to deliver it ourselves or we partner with some of the best in the industry to build those solutions and those services in for the client.
Thanks for that, Bernie. There's a lot of pieces in the operating side that you are delivering, and it sounds like each one is different with your clients. Maybe sub-accounting is the one that's most used.
I'd say sub-fund accounting is most used. What's probably not used that most folks don't really spend a lot of time to think through, I think is a lot to do with when you think about it from a stress test, scenario test, all those. I mean, those modeling systems and things to be able to look through and do real deep scouring through to the portfolio holdings, what if scenarios. I mean, those are a lot of the services that we're bringing into the client in that engagement. I also would just say too, like cybersecurity and technology spend, the use of AI in the investment management industry goes forward. I mean, there are big changes that will be coming down the road. And I think as a firm, we continue to invest heavily into this space because it's evolving. And I think as we go forward, we're going to, you'll find more efficient ways to be able to deliver the solution back to the client utilizing technology, which, again, goes probably back from, build versus buy, again, going back to maybe the build side to incorporate it into a more holistic framework.
Yeah. And it's not just that it's more efficient, but it's a much higher quality than most of these small and mid-sized nonprofits can get on their own. So there's another issue I know you've encountered. You and I have talked about this before, and it's the idea that a client should consider hiring multiple OCIOs, more than one, right? The old portfolio theory. We're going to maximize risk return and take modern portfolio theory to the ultimate logical end. So if one OCIO is good, two should be even better. So I know you've given this some deep thought. What are some of the issues and the unintended consequences that you've identified with this idea?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's frequent. We see it. I mean, I wouldn't say it's common like every opportunity we come across. I mean, it's not that common, but it does happen frequently enough where we do see that mindset. And it's, I guess, in a way, when you think about diversifying and you're thinking about a portfolio, even if you're going to have the portion of your portfolio in large cap growth, let's say, you're not going to just have one large cap growth manager. You can probably diversify. So that concept, is fundamentally not flawed in the sense from very, very high level, hypothetically, right? But when we really get into the how does this really work and come together, I think clients don't realize going to a horse race mentality. I think that's some of it. They let's hire two and like make them compete for it. That creates a lot of unintended risks that you're not probably wanting to take on that you might not be really aware of. So that what could be healthy competition may spread the risk into other things that you're not really. You start to incorporate risks into the engagements that you're just not realizing. I think the first and foremost is like for most organizations, it's going to be increasing their complexity of how you manage this. Managing your relationships with your OCIs are going to be a challenge. Now you're doing it for two, right? You got to manage your communications, coordination for meetings. It just becomes much more contracts, handling different reporting standards and timelines for each provider is not always going to be synced up. I think the bigger issue is going to come into play for most organizations when they get on this path is the overlap and the concentration of holdings. So, when you think about hiring two different managers, you might find that you have an unintended, concentration in a single security that you don't really have the ability to look through. What it really does is put the responsibility back on to the investment committee. They're tasked with that as the chief, sort of fiduciary for the organization. So, now you have to get into like, do we really know where we have those concentration risks, not only in securities, but in sectors? You might feel like having one position might make sense, but now you got too much in one particular area. And then, how do you communicate that back to each of your managers to figure out how do you reduce some of that risk? And do you have the systems in place? And do you have the look through to be able to see those core concentrations when you have to? Most will not have that in place. So there are unintended risks that gets embedded in. Also, I'd say it comes to costs and fees, right? So if you're hiring multiple OCIO providers, there's usually breakpoints, with providers, depending on how much assets you have. The same thing with underlying managers. So, the underlying managers will provide breakpoints when you have more with one individual manager. So like, splitting it up between 2 or 3 OCIO providers can reduce the implementation or can increase your implementation costs. I'd say just also inconsistent on performance. Different managers may have varying performance levels that you're going to be seeing in your overall portfolio now. And so trying to reconcile that and bring that together, and of course, consolidating performance will be another issue. And I just think it's also the alignment and coordination of the issues, ensuring the OCIOs are aligned with the Endowment Foundation's overall investment strategy. The risk tolerance, the investment objectives can be challenging to manage to get multiple providers. So although it sounds great, and in some cases, I think it does make sense where someone might go, well, let's just hire someone that's going to do the core liquid component. We might go out and hire an OCI that's more specialized, say for alternatives. And I think in those instances, that probably makes more sense if you're going to do a split. Otherwise, I think best practices would suggest in the industry that you're choosing one provider. It's also hard to listen to two competing, points of view and outlooks and strategic direction they're trying to give to you, who's got the right approach. So, but that's my opinion on it. Something I think is continuing to be an issue.
Couple of follow-up questions on that. One is when you talk about going back to what you were saying earlier about the partnership that you bring in OCIO 2.0, all the consulting, knowing the whole industry, the whole organization that you're consulting to, would be harder in a situation like that. And it tends to put the focus more back on the pure investment piece as opposed to holistically helping the entire client. So just hypothetically, you might be coming in and advising them on fundraising and all sorts of things, and that's affecting the type of portfolio that you're building versus the other piece might be taking more risk because their mandate is different, and that could have unintended liquidity consequences, for instance, with the client. Yes?
That's right. Yeah, it does. And I think those are the things that the mechanics. I've been in situations where we have been one of the OCIOs and they've got multiple and they bring us all in and we have like a group discussion and it's really a fundamental flaw. I think for most, they think it's a good way to enter in because they can't really make a decision. I say one of the reasons why they go down this path is they start the process by trying to figure out what is the right governance solution? Should we be consultant? Should we do something where we maintain some discretion? Do we do full OCIO? And then at the same time, they're trying to figure out which is the type of provider we should go with. Should we go to a large financial service firm to bring in these extra services? Should we go to a boutique that might give us better access and more of a bespoke approach to small client base, whatever it is? And so they try to put two together because they can't make the right decision. So I always tell folks, go down and educate yourself. Start educating, understanding what's going to be the right governance structure for you as an organization. I will say, again, I've written on this, the governance budget. Every organization's got a governance budget. And that governance budget is a critical piece. Like, I don't think of budget governance in the form of budget. Yeah, risk budgeting, fee budget, financial budgeting. But your governance is actually something you can budget because it comes down to resources, expertise, time that's available. And even if you have the who's who of Wall Street sitting on your investment committee, there's bandwidth constraints. They're not meeting every single month. They can't. Are they able to make effective decisions timely, or are they punting it down the road? So again, spend time on the governance aspect. What's the right model for you? Think about your governance budget. Get that settled. Then think about the different types of providers. Okay, when you get the different types of providers out there, choose one. Don't choose two. And then from there, go through a good discussion and also just make, with them to learn. And I'd say one last thing I'll just jump on and say is, we typically see this often too many times. If you're going to give a half hour with 15 minutes of questions, how are you going to make a very complex decision like that? You need to spend more time with these providers because then you'll be less apt to go down the path of saying, well, no, these two both were great. Let's just hire them both. Carve out a really good amount of time to get to know these providers. Don't just treat 30 minutes, 50 minutes of questions. I think that's just a flawed model, which leads a lot of people down the path of having to choose two or more.
It's taking the traditional model of hiring a single manager who's going to have single digits of your portfolio and applying it to a big decision to hire someone to take all of your portfolio for what's more like a decade. We think of hiring an OCIO. You should be thinking about it like a decade. You should be thinking about it if you're a board member, as going past your tenure, and you should be thinking of it like a marriage. So if you think of it that way, you wouldn't marry someone after a 20-minute presentation and a 15-minute Q&A. I hope not, anyway.
And nor would you marry multiple people, but some might. But the United States, you would say that there's flaws in that too. So
that would be another podcast, Bernie. So why don't we end with your favorite part of working on the St. Patty's Day parade in New York? Can you tell me something fun from behind the scenes, or what you've seen, or anything that you really love about it?
Well, it's something I'm very passionate about. I was asked, just it was probably 12 years ago to join the foundation for the New York City St. Patrick's Day Parade. I think they were looking at the fact that they were living hand to mouth every year in all of their fundraising efforts to produce the parade, and felt there was a need for a longer term solution to endow the parade, as well as to ensure that they're promoting and helping support a lot of the important aspects around education and culture, Irish culture in the United States. Of course, demographics, things will change over time, so we want to ensure it's here for the future. Longest standing parade, and oldest and longest standing parade in the world. It's terrific. I'd say, it's part of, I march every year in the parade. At least I try to. And I think we always have a great group of individuals that come in that wear that passion every day in what they do professionally and showing up to kind of support their heritage. But it's also more than just the Irish parade and Irish heritage. It's really hallmarks to, defining what happens in New York City. It's a big event for the city. But I can't really think of any you got me on the spot to think about a funny story or something behind the scenes. But it is a great organization to be part of.
Yeah. I'm always on the wrong side of the street, and when the parade is coming, but it's a fantastic event, and that's part of the types of nonprofits that you are helping in your business. I'm sure that's how you ended up getting involved in the first place.
Yes, I think it's always good. We serve out most of our strategists and our endowment foundation specialists all work on board. So I think it's 2.5 million hours of volunteer hours the bank brings to our regions and the markets that we're in. We're very philanthropically engaged. And, being involved with the, charity really helps you understand as a board member, sitting on the other side of the table, what the issues are. I've served on a couple of independent schools as well when I've got that perspective. So yeah, it's very rewarding. I think it also helps you really understand full picture when you're involved in this business to appreciate all the issues when you're a trustee yourself.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Bernie, for all your insights. Thank you for your support of the Chestnut Solutions Institute. And thanks for joining me today. This was really fun.
It was, Amanda. It was a pleasure to spend some time with you today. Thank you again.
Chestnut Advisory Group is a boutique, practitioner-led management consulting firm dedicated to asset managers and investment solutions providers. In addition to the Chestnut Solutions Institute, our advisory practice areas include distribution strategy, M&A support, go-to-market, and implementation and coaching services. This podcast is owned and produced by the Chestnut Solutions Institute. If you like this content and would like to access more insights, webinars, and podcasts, please check out our website, chestnutadvisory.com.